Hello and welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and this is our new and exciting coverage of Murder on Songbird Road. I'm very excited to be doing this. My partner in crime just showed up backstage. Look at her, right on time. Her timing is impeccable. So we are really, really excited to do this. If you guys are not aware, I'm assuming that everybody in here is aware of the hit podcast, Murder on Songbird Road, the baby of the brilliant Lauren Bright Pacheco, who is my partner in crime on this thing. She asked me along for the ride, and we've had a great time doing this together. We've found it fascinating. We became fast friends. All those wonderful things have happened, and we think that we've put together a pretty darn interesting podcast that we think, as this journey meanders through the twists and turns that you guys are going to hear over the next 10, 11, 12, who knows how many episodes, that you guys are going to be as fascinated by it as we are. And we thought it would be a great idea if after every episode, we give you guys a few days, a weekend to listen to it. And then naturally, I think that there's going to be some questions. I would find it hard to believe if you don't have questions, because Lauren and I still have questions all the time. So without further ado, let me bring her on. Hello, my friend.
Hey.
How are you?
Better now, thanks to dry shampoo and a shirt.
You look fabulous.
As opposed to sweats, which I've been wearing most of the day.
Well, I still have my sweats on, but that's down low. No one needs to see those, This is how during the pandemic, this is how I went to Zoom court. Well, shirt and tie and a jacket, and then sweatpants or pajama pants.
Now you have to promise me no spoilers. No spoilers, Bob.
I have been promoting this all over the place, and I keep telling everyone no spoilers. Our Q&A is going to be limited to what you have heard in episodes 1 and 2. As long as you guys can stick within those parameters, we'll be able to answer the questions. If you guys start getting ahead of yourselves out there, if you start getting a little anxious because you want information, too bad. We're not giving it to you. We're no spoilers here. This is zero spoilers. Plus that sucks the joy out of it. It's like cheating in the game.
It's true. Maybe some hints.
Yes.
And one little tease. Today we had another potential huge break in the case, which was part of the reason why I was in sweatpants most of the day, just working the emails and the phones. But I have to say, this is probably the most fascinating story that I've ever tackled in terms of the twists and the turns. And it really has been a roller coaster. So we want to hear thoughts on it, because Lord knows we've been on both sides of assumptions. And there have been so many things that have come out during the course of investigating this. And you mentioned that we've become friends. That's really true. But we've also bonded because we spent so much time there
Yep.
driving to and from there,
Yep.
jail visits, and really, what they call in the business boots on the ground, which is a
Yep.
little melodramatic. So it makes it sound like we're soldiers, but I think that the best way to understand a story and to understand a community is to try as best as you can to become part of it.
100%. And not to undersell the boots on the ground thing, because you and I can both attest, walking up to a stranger's door and knocking on it, hoping that we're going to talk to them or that they'll be willing to talk to us about something that we know more likely than not, depending on proximity to where the crime took place, is going to be pretty triggering for them.
Mhm.
We talk to people that we know probably do not want to talk to us at all. There's an element of nerve-wracking danger that exists in what we do. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna lean into that boots on the ground, because it's every bit of that. We're not sitting behind computers. We're getting out there. We're talking to people. We're trying to, if it calls for it, ruffle feathers. If it doesn't, we're trying to massage people. Whatever we need to do in order to try to get what we feel is valuable information, we're doing it. So, I mean, by definition, that is boots on the ground. So that's what we do. So, I saw a comment. Yes, if you subscribe to iHeart, you will get a bonus episode. You'll be ahead one episode of all the other kids in the class. So we recommend you do that. If you just can't wait, then go ahead, get your subscription to iHeart. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's probably, I think right now, a free trial period. So like once you get in there, they're going to get you, but you could probably join for free initially for a trial period. I don't know how long that lasts, and then they'll hit you with a subscription fee. But in our estimation, I I'm a more patient person than my wife, who is very impatient, but I'm still pretty impatient. Like, I want to know. I always want to know. Well, Mandy, we don't want them to cancel the free trial. Well, we want them to subscribe, because then there'll always be an episode ahead, but we will always be an episode behind of the episode ahead, because we want to talk to everybody that's listening to the show, and some people just,
That's fair. That's a good point. You
yes,
don't have to pay to play.
right,
In other
exactly,
words, we want people listening no matter how
exactly,
they do it. And we will
exactly.
not give any spoilers for the next episode.
No spoilers. Like, we cannot be more clear about that. You can ask it, we're going to ignore it. If I start to slip, Lauren's going to slap me in the mouth.
Yeah, I
It's just,
know. I miss Allison because Allison has closer proximity to you.
I
She'll,
know, I
she has
know.
a better chance of actually slapping you than I do virtually.
She
I'm
does.
go I'm gonna make sure that I
I
text
mean,
her.
you can just
Where is
text her,
she?
right? Yeah. It's pretty simple. All right. So, you guys, if you were with us the first time that Lauren and I did this, we actually were lucky enough to play our episode. We're not going to be doing that, because we don't want to have to kind of deal with, I don't want to have to pull these off. I like to leave them sit. So what the hope is, kind of by a show of hands, why don't you let us know how many of you guys have been able to listen to episodes 1 and 2? Just give me the little hand emoji there in the chat, and that way we'll have a pretty good idea. And,
Again, I can't see the chat.
oh, hold on. What?
I know.
Hold on. I think I can fix that. Let me see. I turn it off sometimes, depending on who the guest is. If I'm worried about them being abused, I sometimes will turn that off. All right, let me see. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Do you see, how about now?
Let's see. Nope.
Do you see the
We
do you
can't.
see the
Now I can. Now I can.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so I think somebody did ask if they could kind of get a recap of episode 2. And so episode 2 deals with the arrest. And so it starts out, I'm pulling up the whole thing now. I have the scripts.
Mm. I mean, you can't get more behind the scenes than that. I mean, we've got the woman who wrote the scripts right here.
So it's just a question of pulling it up on the other one. So it deals with the way in which Beverly was arrested. And it also deals with a tip that her mother, Renee, called in the days following the murder. Basically, in a nutshell, it is Renee's point of view that Julia was overwhelmed with shock and grief to the point where she wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping, she wasn't drinking, and she emotionally was in a state of shock. And as her mother categorized it, deep grief. And it was a few days afterwards that she actually remembered, wait, I stopped at Huck's.
Right.
And Renee claims that she called that tip in to Detective Gustantine, and they acted upon it. But that's not what ultimately led to Beverly's arrest. They had already filed the papers the day before she called that in. But the way in which she was arrested is interesting because she was arrested at her grandmother's house, and 3 officers came in, and Renee's mother, Julie's elderly grandmother, was alive at that point, and they were arresting Julie. She was very emotional, and the grandmother said, "You're killing her." And and this is what Renee remembers and Julia remembers. Keep in mind that I have reached out to Cindy Geitman, and she has chosen quite sternly not to comment on what was her first and last murder investigation. But she apparently said to Renee's mother, that's what she gets for killing someone.
Yeah. Which we hear a lot of, from the early portions of the investigation. That was kind of like a prevailing thought, especially when you kind of are talking to people that were in the trial, which we're not going to get into the weeds in terms of the trial because that's coming, in terms of kind of the ins and outs of what happened at trial. And again, that definitely falls into spoiler categories. But, when you come to find out what the jury as well as the gallery was told by the state, you start to get an understanding of why that seemed to be a prevailing thought. And I'll kind of leave it at that.
Well, let's dive into the presumption of innocence, right? That you are to be given the presumption of innocence until you go through the trial and there is a verdict. So just as an attorney, what's your take on that when the lead investigator says that in front of the family of the person they're arresting?
Does it surprise me? No. I think that that's a very common mindset for law enforcement once they kind of lock in on a suspect. They get to that point where they believe that they've got the right person and they believe that they've done their work and that their case is rock solid, and you can keep that presumption of innocence. That's for jurors. That's not for us. Our job is to find the killers and the bad guys, and that's what we did here. So, that's a very frustrating thing for me to try to combat almost on a daily basis on our channel. I try to explain to people who I hear that more, that kind of statement that I'm not a juror, the presumption of innocence. I'm allowed to have my own opinion, and you're not going to affect that no matter what you say to me. So, and my response is always like, hey, look, we're human beings. We all form initial opinions. What I'm asking you to do always is wait until trial, wait until the evidence comes out, wait until the evidence is vetted. And then at that point, you come up with what may be your final opinion on something. You can't lock into it too early. And the presumption of innocence is not a thing for jurors. It's not a thing for courtrooms and trials alone. What it is it's a mindset. I try to explain this to people all the time. You have to go through every day of your life when you, especially if you're consuming true crime, just kind of hammering away at the concept that in this country that we are all presumed innocent and that there's a burden on our government to prove that we have committed a crime before they can throw us in prison. I mean, if you think about it any other way, you would not want to live in a country where it was the other way around, where you're presumed guilty. And when people are saying, "Oh, well, I don't care about the presumption of innocence. They made an arrest. This is what they're telling the press. This is what the media is reporting. Person sounds like they're guilty. I think they got the right person." That mindset is the only way you can fix it, is to try to turn it around on its head and try to think of it in terms of if everybody was presumed guilty in this country and that we all had to somehow prove our innocence. And when you start thinking about just your normal everyday life, like if you're a single person and you were home last night, asleep at 1 a.m, but someday in the near future, law enforcement knocks on your door and they say that we have a warrant for your arrest. And they say, "Look, we have to take you into custody right away. And you're going to have to prove your innocence because there is no presumption of innocence. We have a presumption of guilt in this country." And you have no alibi. They're claiming that they have an eyewitness who saw you. They're claiming that they have evidence against you, that you were at the scene, whether it be DNA, a hair, whatever. And at that point, you're taken into custody and you have to try to figure out a way, because it's your burden to prove that you didn't do it, and you have no way to do it because you were at home alone in your bed sleeping. And how are you going to prove that? What are you going to say? "Okay, well, my phone was here." All right, well, smart criminals don't bring their phones with them to crimes that they're going to commit. I mean, they're going to rebut you at every turn. If you start to think about it in that way, you start to realize how important that principle is to our country and the way that we've decided to form this government and the criminal justice system. That was no accident that the presumption of innocence was written in, because they lived it. They lived it over in England. That was not the case over there. When we decided to start this country, the forefathers had different ideas, and they wanted to have the power sit in the hands of the citizens as opposed to in the hands of the government. And I think once you kind of wrap your mind around that concept, because there's no harm in presuming that people are innocent until the government proves them guilty. There's no harm in that. You can still think, well, gee, I'm going to presume that they are innocent because the state hasn't proven anything yet. But, I can still think that they think they got the right guy. You can feel that way. They're not mutually exclusive things, but you just have to lock into, you are an innocent person when you sit in that court, even through trial. And while you're sitting in jail, if you can't bond out, you're an innocent person in there until they prove otherwise. And once you kind of lock in on that concept, it kind of changes the way that you look at things.
Well, then it goes, think about Salem witch trials. That's what you get when it is guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
Right.
If you float, you're a witch. If you sink, congratulations. You're dead, but you're innocent. And Delightfully Chaotic, I think, made a really good point. For me, what that does is it falls lockstep with the theory of tunnel vision. When you have the arresting officer saying you're guilty and that's why you're being arrested, you've put the cart in front of the horse.
Yeah. 100%. And you know, the funny thing is that if you were to shift the focus of trusting the government, which is what you're doing when you're deciding that presumption of innocence isn't really a thing for you, you're saying, oh, well, the government said it so, so it's so. If you shift that from the criminal justice system to politics and think about how much you trust politicians in general, it's a strange dichotomy because they're all the government, you know, and like I can't speak for anybody other than myself. I don't trust the government, and that's a fact. I think that there's way too many conflicts of interest. There's way too much money and power involved, and I just think that the reason that we set up the Constitution was in order to tell the government, okay, look, we've got some pretty strict guidelines by which you have to operate, because remember, we're the boss, us being the citizens, not the government.
Mhm.
And I think people forget that concept. Like the Constitution is literally a bunch of rules, not that we have to follow as citizens, but that the government has to follow. The Bill of Rights is all saying, hey, you're the government and you cannot create laws that infringe upon all of these different rights. You can't make any kind of law that infringes on our right to free speech. You can't make a law that infringes upon our right to practice whatever religion we want. Like all of our rights that are granted to us through the entire process are written in the Bill of Rights within the Constitution, and I think people just forget about that.
Well, you know, the other thing is you brought up money in politics. Unfortunately, money plays a huge role in who gets justice and how they get it in this country. There's a great death row preacher named Joe Engel, and you and I have spoken about this before, but he said something that really stuck with me. He said that it is his experience, and you know, he has ministered to death row inmates around the country. And his belief is that being on death row doesn't mean you actually killed somebody. It means you couldn't afford a private attorney.
That's gospel right there. That is gospel right there. So, yeah, I mean, when we swing it back around to Julie's case, I mean, it became evident immediately that tunnel vision had developed. As we progress through the series, you guys are going to see more and more about just what wasn't done and what was done in terms of the investigation. We found it shocking. I think that you guys will find it equally as shocking. Um, I mean, I was enraged about certain things that we found out, you know.
I think that this is kind of like uh, um, a rage onion. You know, we keep getting new layers of rage.
Right.
We got more today. And so in a way, look, I'm so appreciative to your community, people who listen, who, you know, I don't mean this in a cheesy way. It's audio activism. You're choosing to listen to something that needs to be corrected or could be improved. And so I think that it's so important that we allow what's going into our ears to open up our minds and our eyes to injustice in general. And look, this is not saying that Beverly had no bad facts or things that led ultimately to her conviction. And Bob and I will tell you that through the first 6 months, even we would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we will very thoroughly lay out the bad facts, the things that really made one question Beverly's innocence. And then we will very, 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 very methodically unpack issues that remain with the case that the prosecution built against her.
Yeah, and it's just one of those cases when you dig in really, really heavily. You just keep uncovering things that just don't add up, and it's like in this case we have this combination of two things. We've got what we both feel was an awful investigation for a lot of reasons, and then you couple that with an awful trial. So it's like you've got these two things that are over here on this side of the scale, and then when we kind of get to what we consider to be the bad facts in the case, and I look at them, it's just so outweighed by the first two things that I spoke about, aside from all the other things that have just kind of started to become clear to us through our investigation. It's a thing where, like you said, we kind of ping ponged it back and forth a lot. We would debate it a lot. We'd discuss it a lot about, man, she do it or didn't she do it? Did she do it? She didn't do it. And I think ultimately, but I'm not going to give any spoilers there
Yeah, you
either.
better not. I
No.
want to go back. DB actually asked a question about Christopher Vaughn, and perfect timing because I was stalking Bob today because he needs to do his take on my take of the Vaughn case. I can tell you that Gail Vaughn actually, I'm in constant contact with the Vaughns, and I am in constant contact with his legal team. I am actually an unpaid consultant for the legal team because I think Bob can attest. I don't do this because I like hearing the sound of my voice. I do this because I think that I can use my voice to help people who don't have one. And Vaughn's voice very much was taken away. And Gail Vaughn, his mother, reached out to me. She'd listened to the first two episodes of Murder on Songbird Road, and she was struck by the similarities in terms of the fact that one family was notified. Keep in mind that, Renee found out about the murders at Songbird from her niece who lived halfway across the country, whereas Michael Beasley's family was immediately notified by the police. And there's a lot of overlap between police officers and the Beasley family, the judge and the Beasley family. And that will all come out. But both Christopher Vaughn and Beverly's case was tried by media before they even set foot in the courtroom. Vaughn was held for 5 years. Beverly was held for 2 years. Beverly had the added disadvantage of having her case tried in social media within the community. And that is something that we will go into in much more detail. But Bob and I conducted interviews where people who sat through the trial were flat out misinformed about what was admissible evidence and what wasn't, because they were getting their news from their social media feeds.
Yep.
And the comments on the local news site were deplorable. I mean, they were just beyond the pale in terms of being really tinged with racism.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I know you're not supposed to look at Apple reviews, but every so often I will. And somebody said, I was out as soon as I heard Black Lives Matter, because when the police responded, there were Black Lives Matter signs. Now, this was 2020. 2020 was a very different time. Today, it will be a very different time from next year this time.
Yep.
And within that heated environment, there was the division of us versus them
Right.
in terms of law enforcement and people.
Right.
And so you were either with the cops or you were against the cops. And in that time period, having a Black Lives Matter sign implied that blue lives didn't.
Right. Which was super annoying to me.
Yeah, and you cannot cherry pick that from this community, particularly since this community is 86% white.
Right. I
That's
mean,
white.
yeah, that's a super white town. I mean, that is, and not only that, it's a super white town in Southern Illinois. And, I mean, if you just kind of look at the facts around racism and where a bulk of racism seems to live, it's, in the South. I mean, south of Chicago. I mean, this is a very, very rural state. And rural typically speaks to people that have never experienced the pleasure of hanging around with other people of other races and ethnicities that are very just kind of stuck in this life wherein they are just with people that look just like them and think just like them and do things just like them. And that's a very different way that the rest of the world lives in terms of, the more urban you get. I think that the less you see that. That's not to say that it doesn't exist, but I mean, Marion, which leads me right into, and we've got a good question. And please,
Oh,
start asking your
yeah,
question.
and DB, I never finished answering GB's
Oh
question.
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
that's right.
Yes, here is your in a nutshell update on Christopher Vaughn. Um, they are getting ready to submit uh, a very convincing argument for either overturning his conviction or getting a new trial. And I will not give any more of a spoiler alert because I'm going to let Bob address that when he tackles the case.
Which is imminent. Which is imminent. All right. So I wanted to pull up. I thought it would be helpful for those who have never kind of been familiar with the area that we're talking about here. So this Google Images, as you can see, we've got St. Louis, Missouri here. If I can blow it up a little bit. Got St. Louis here. Okay. So you got Missouri. Over here is Illinois. Okay. And when I get down to, so you've got this kind of situation where you're abutted up against Missouri, Tennessee, and I'm gonna pull you to the house.
This is
Okay.
fancy, Bob. Look at
Pretty
you.
fancy. So this is the house. Now this is from Google Views. Now I'm going to show you. I'm going to zoom out of this a little bit, um,
It
just so
is
you guys
rural.
get an idea. It's very, very rural. So if we were to look around, kind of like just to get a view of what it looks like around, you can see what
Now,
we're
this
talking.
is a great point. I want to ask everybody to put themselves in Julia Beverly's shoes. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's say she did it. You have to dispose of the murder weapon, the bloody clothes, everything you use to clean up. Do that 360 again. This is so rural. It is surrounded by fields, abandoned Little League baseball fields, which if we
Sure.
went a little bit down the road, you could see. It's actually kind of endearing and creepy at the same time.
So if we
But
were driving,
is there any way, there's one of them, is there any way in hell you are going to put everything into a little plastic bag that fits into one hand? And keep in mind, we've said it's the murder weapon, the bloody clothes, her shoes, they claimed that she put in there as well. Um, And you're going to drive into civilization to do it at a gas station?
That has cameras?
Yeah, and that's no spoilers because we'll be getting to that in
Oh,
episode 3.
oh,
But,
sorry.
but I just if you're gonna dispose of evidence, why not do it somewhere in the very rural area? There's wooded area in the back of her house. The neighboring property has bodies of water, lots of easier places
Yeah,
to
it
dispose of evidence.
it makes no sense. It makes 0 sense that she would have done that. Um, so kind of the way that this thing played out, specifically in um this particular episode when we talk about the video from the Hawks. Okay. All right. So this is going to bring us out to the map. Okay. So if I were to point you guys out to the Hawks, this is the Hawks in question. Okay. And this Hawks.
Now keep in mind, we're going through all of this in the next episode.
Oh, we are? Well,
Yes.
we talk, we at least we talk about the video. So
Yeah.
that's all we'll say about it. So this is the Hawks that Julie and you heard her mother Renee talking about midway through the episode where Renee became aware that Julie remembered that she stopped at this Hawks and that she pulled up because she was out of gas and she was going to get some fuel, went into her purse and then realized that she doesn't have her debit or credit cards with her. So at that point, she then turns around and because she can't fill up and she goes back home. So when we look at the distance between those two, that's this here. So we've got, it says about 7 minutes, 4.1 miles. So you can see there's, and it's this is all that rural area back here, back by the house and all the way up until you get down past here, down Corey League Road, and really not until you hit Norman Road here is when you kind of get back into civilization.
Yeah, that's I think well, we'll get into that in
Yeah,
the next episode, but
more in
we
depth.
definitely give a tour of it.
Yeah.
Um,
So, all right, here's the first question. It seems like there might be so that Lisa's jumping ahead. Now, Lisa admittedly subscribed to iHeart, so she's heard the third episode. So, is there anything on this question that we can answer?
the tub was not overflowing, but the water was running. Um, there were that's a bit of a spoiler, but I will say that the wounds were um, definitely in keeping with a very brutal attack where Jade was running away from the person who was stabbing her. She We don't know if she climbed into the tub. I can tell you that she was 5'3" and 130 pounds, and Julia Beverly was 4'11" and maybe 115. If she were murdered and then placed in the tub, I don't think there is any way she would have been found in the position that she was found, which was a slightly fetal position, leaning forward. It is my belief, without giving spoilers, that Jade climbed into the tub.
Right. I mean, to me, without giving spoilers, that's what I think happened too, because we can't really talk about why we think that, but in the next couple of episodes, you're going to start hearing a lot more of kind of the factual background of what law enforcement thinks happened. And then we kind of combat that a little bit with things that we've learned from Julie herself, and other evidence that we've looked at in terms of police reports and
And
things of that
Lisa,
nature.
you are definitely onto something. It was cold water. And in terms of the time of death, we will address that with a former CSI who goes through the autopsy
Yeah,
with us.
and that's a pretty big point when we get to that in terms of the time of death, or what people think the time of death is in terms of the state's theory, and then other theories that may exist. So, boy, it's really hard not to give spoilers, isn't it?
I know it is.
Hard. It's so hard not to.
I know it is.
So, but when we talk about this episode in particular, the way that it kind of went down with Julie being taken into custody, with them talking to her pretty extensively, and then releasing her that night. And that's when, she stays at her grandmother's house.
And again, sounds like a broken record, but Julia Beverly willingly went in for questioning without legal representation, willingly gave her DNA. And my father was an attorney. I have told both of my children, if you're innocent, you definitely need a lawyer. There is no reason to sit down with police without an attorney present.
Not a chance. Like I say that constantly on our channel, and it's kind of like a cognitive dissonance with that concept that, because cops make you feel very much like if you ask for an attorney that you must be guilty, because only a guilty person would ask for an attorney. And just the fact of the matter is if they've asked you in or brought you in for questioning, either way, they want information from you. If you are a lay witness and they are just trying to get some information about what you may have seen, typically they'll stop by your house or they'll call you, and they'll say, "Hey, can we stop by? We just had a couple questions for you." If they're inviting you into their house, just understand that they are thinking something or they are searching for something from you, and you need to have a lawyer present, because
Anything you say
can
and will be held against you.
and that is gospel.
Mhm.
Like when they say that, like they were forced into the having to read Miranda rights for a reason.
Just wait, quickly, because I saw a great comment. What do you do if you can't afford a lawyer? You can choose the right to remain silent, and you will be appointed one.
Right. You just invoke your right to remain silent. Now, with that situation, what we see typically as attorneys is that they keep coming at you, because I want to speak to my lawyer. I'm not going to say anything until I speak to my lawyer, are the magic words that have to shut it down. Invoking is supposed to have the same impact. Typically, it doesn't. Typically, they'll kind of like continue to talk a little bit. They'll say things like, "Oh, well, look, we're just trying to help you out here. We just want to clear you of this thing." They always start easy before they start heavy on you. And, they're going to tell you things that make you think that they're trying to help you out. Like, that's just how they operate. That's how they're trained.
And
Conducting
depending
interrogation.
upon what state you're in, they can lie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Supreme Court says they can lie about anything that is not making promises as to the resolution of the case. I mean, they can lie about the evidence that they claim that they have, like flat out. They can tell you, "Yeah, we found your DNA at the scene." We could tell you, "Oh, yeah, we've got your friend over in the next interrogation room or conference room," and they just ratted you out. You're
Oh,
done.
to go back to Vaughn, they told him they're surveillance cameras and they caught everything on camera. We already know what happened. And poor naive Christopher Vaughn said, can I see it? What did they show? Because he didn't understand what had transpired.
Right.
But there were no surveillance cameras.
Right.
There was no film.
Yeah, those interrogations were rough.
Oh, brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah, super, super brutal. All right, so let's see. What else do you think that we like? You guys aren't asking enough questions. I expect to see questions here. It's interesting because I want some.
I'm seeing some good ones in the.
All right, where are you
Yeah,
seeing?
I'm with you, Lindsay. Am I being detained? Nope. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. Which a majority of people just when they're in that moment, and I've had clients that are repeat clients that I have told unequivocally if they're ever in a situation again or they're taken into custody, you just shut the fuck up. It's a simple rule. It's and I say it just like that because everyone remembers that. It's the
Yeah,
one
but
rule, but when you get in the heat of the moment, when they start coming at you, when they use all the techniques that they have and they say all the things that they say, and we're just trying to help you out here. We're just, we just need to hear, where were you? Like they start asking these rather innocuous questions in order to get you talking. Because once they can get you talking, then it takes a long time for you as a human being to realize, oh my God, like I'm completely talking to these people and they're construing things through their own perception. And if they think that they like you for it, everything that you say is going to be twisted in their minds as to something that's inculpable or culpable as opposed to inculpable. And it's a super tricky situation.
that's such a Bobism. They liked you for it.
Yeah,
They like you for it. I've had to translate that during interviews. When Bob says they liked her for it, it means they thought she was guilty.
right, right. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I think that like ultimately, if everybody just understands that primary concept that you just shut up when you're in there, unless you're going to have a lawyer present. That's not to say that you never can talk to the cops. You just have to have a lawyer with you. You have a sit down with your lawyer and say, okay, this is what my story is regarding this entire occurrence. And your lawyer's going to say, all right, well, do you have an alibi? And you're going to say, well, no, I mean, I was home asleep by myself, or I was home with my wife who, they automatically think is going to lie for you. I mean, it's one of those things where a lot of times people just don't have an alibi. A lot of times people can just be at home and that's not the greatest alibi. It's like you get that thing where you're saying, well, I was watching this on TV. Oh, what was a game? What was the score of the game? They'll try to ask specifics, trying to catch you in little lies. And if you're inaccurate about anything, or if you start feeling the pressure, because that's the one thing that I think that you guys will see in this case, and you're going to have to kind of judge the things that you'll hear later on that Julie says, keeping in mind of the situation that she's in, keeping in mind of the mindset that she's in, keeping in mind with the trauma that she's just knee deep in, and all of those things are going on in your mind at that certain time, and you're kind of like, it's hard to know how you'd respond in that. It's so easy to sit back on your couch or laying in your bed listening to a podcast and say, I would never do that. I would never do that. And then when you're stuck in the situation, it's just like this is one of those things that you simply cannot, there's no way that you can in any way, shape, or form recreate it in your mind. You can only experience it. It's just a very bizarre set of circumstances. I mean, most people will go their entire lives never having been questioned by law enforcement. And when you are thrust into that situation without a moment to think about it beforehand, or something happens that you are just sucked into the vortex of law enforcement, and you don't have any time to think, you're trying to figure out what the hell happened. You're not even thinking about strategery. You're just trying to figure out what happened. All right, are you seeing anything good?
Yeah, I'm totally listening to you. I'm scrolling through as well. Um,
Okay, so you unfortunately you can't star them.
okay.
I'm
So
gonna
we'll
try.
quickly, I can answer 2 quickly before we even get to this one, but Hank Brennan's incisors asked where Jade's dad was when this happened. He was working as a cook, assistant cook at Cracker Barrel, so he left the house at 7 AM, and the prosecution contends that this happened between 9:30 and 10:15 AM. Um, Funkarella said that they made the ultimate mistake of reporting a crime and almost a year later being interviewed by the police about it, ending up being charged, and their life was imploded and was ruined. That's horrible.
Scary. Scary. Um, Tracy, the term unalive, I think, was basically born out of YouTube because of their community standards. You tend to get demonetized if you use the M word. Definitely if you use the R
That's
word.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are words that they just don't like. You won't get into the algorithm if you have it in there. So I think people started coming up with alternatives. I typically use the word homicide. That seems to be a way to kind of avoid it. But I also use unaliving as well, or I'll call it the R word, um, or SA. Which is actually what they call it in Illinois now. The R word no longer exists in Illinois. They call it aggravated SA. So, Lisa's got another question. Families
Yes.
and suicide at first. Why?
Okay. So we do get into that in episode 3. And so let me just say that there were, and we don't dive into the specifics of it, but this is an innuendo that has come up in multiple interviews that we've done, that Jade was processing something socially that would have led her to be depressed. And so that was something that came up in the biological mother's first interview with police. And so the family was under the assumption that it was suicide, both families. And Renee was under that assumption when she picked Julia up from the police precinct the night of the murder. And so she was shocked when she heard her daughter tell her the story about a masked intruder and said, "You need to tell Mike about this. He thinks that it was suicide." And
Right.
so that was something that originated with Jade's biological mother and her father's family.
All right.
Lisa, you've got such good questions. Cannot answer the question about the phone because it is a huge spoiler alert, but I love the way you think because you're right there with us. And you will be, um
Don't even say it. We can't talk
I
about
won't even
food.
say, now look, you're telling me. You're
I
telling
know
me.
it's
I'll just
really
drink my
hard not to
water.
know.
Just drink my water.
The shady meeting with Jade's father. We're gonna have to. We'll defer that one till a little later. I think you guys are going to be very surprised about whether or not we were able to meet with Jade's father and how that went, if we did. Any further explanation of that? So sadly, Lisa, there's some of the questions we just can't get to.
Yeah, but you've got
And
great questions.
yeah, always. You always have great questions. And one of the things that is interesting, and just keep in mind, because I think we kind of laid this out in the first episode, was that the way that it was set up, like it talk about a perfect storm in terms of law enforcement being able to build a case. On this particular weekend, the two toddlers were not at home. They were with Mike's mother. Mike is the biological father of the victim, Jade. Jade had been at the same place where the two toddlers were up until Friday, when she decided she wanted to come home because she had a party that she was supposed to be going to. And then Jaden, who is Julia's biological son, was with, and you heard him at the very beginning of episode 2. Okay. She was down with her dad for the weekend. So what you have is essentially, and now as Lauren just told you, Mike had left for work that morning. And as if you guys listened to episode 1, you know that Julie, this is in the middle of the pandemic. She worked for Hyatt and she was working from home, fielding all the complaints from the dissatisfied customers of Hyatt. So she basically worked in her home office and she worked at her computer and she would answer emails and, complaints and deal with all those types of things. So you have the situation where it's just Julie and Jade at the house. So that is kind of the perfect storm that just built up in terms of how this thing played out, where, that set of circumstances turns out to be an absolute nightmare for Julia. And, was really a godsend in terms of the eyes of law enforcement because it made their jobs, in their estimation, super easy.
And, just bringing up Julia's job, yes, she was working at home during the pandemic, but she was so good at what she did that she earned that privilege long before the pandemic because she wanted to be with her children as much as possible. And so this gave her that freedom. But she was a customer service representative for Hyatt, so she made her living basically calming down irate people who had complaints or problems with Hyatt. And so think about the temperament that you would need to have to be that person as well, because that's something to consider.
I mean, it's a big thing. I mean, you really do have to have a certain temperament to field complaints all day, every day. I mean, that's your gig, is to try to massage people so that they're not so angry. You're probably given very limited authority to make things right in terms of credits and things like that. So, it's really, it takes a lot of tact, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a thick skin. Like all of those things are really required to do that type of job. And like Lauren was saying, I mean, Julia was just really good at it, which when you kind of start trying to figure out how somebody like that, and the more that you learn about Julia as we progress through the series, I think the more you're going to kind of understand just why Lauren and I wanted to dig into this case so much, because it just doesn't add up. It's one of those
And
cases that just doesn't add up.
and for the record, the state never presented a motive.
Nope,
They
nothing.
didn't have one. No motive and no evidence.
No motive, no evidence. Like you have that. I mean, if you have those two things and you have the government say you did it, you better damn well hope that you have a really good lawyer, or that you've got people like Lauren and I out there that are willing to relook at this thing, and hopefully a ton of people like you guys out there that are going to be loud voices in this case. And you guys know that I know how loud you can be and loyal you can be when you think that there's been a wrong that's been committed out there with the Delphi thing. I mean, I just that whole committee that we've put together, and I'd say committee, but it's much bigger. It's really more of a community um, that is out there trying to fight for justice on that case, and justice in that case may be as simple as just getting Rick Allen a fair trial. I mean, if after a fair trial, a jury reaches the same conclusion, well, then, I mean, there you go. I mean, you're stuck with that verdict. And, if you have a situation where a fair trial was had, it becomes near impossible to overturn it. You need those elements of error and unfairness to
Oh,
exist.
you know what? I have said it before, but when the system decides that you are guilty, it moves forward with all the weight of the system. But when it realizes that a mistake has been made, it is almost impossible to reverse those wheels. And it moves backwards like a frozen slug nailed to the board. It just is impossible. And so that's honestly where something like this, where you can retry a case in the court of public opinion, um, makes a tremendous difference.
It does.
And even that, unfortunately, isn't always enough, you know? So
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's not, and it's so frustrating, and it's so saddening, and it's just one of those things where you see what's kind of developing, and it's one of the only things I like about social media is just kind of there is a power to it, and if it's wielded properly, and just the ability to be able to disseminate information on such a massive scale is we live in such different times, you
and
know.
show put a full spotlight on corruption and on mistakes, and hopefully embarrass the people in positions of power enough so that they correct them.
Right. I mean, it's just it's such a monumental task to like you said, to undo it. It's unbelievable. It's like that's why the lawyers that commit their lives to doing it, I just always respect the hell out of them,
Oh,
including my
absolutely.
wife. It's like Allison writing that 300-page nightmare brief that went on for 2 years, her post-conviction relief act petition, but it was the guy's last shot, and she really believed that, um, he was wrongfully convicted, or he is wrongfully convicted and needs to be out. So, I mean, you need that kind of passion on that side in order to really kind of
Oh my
get.
god, you need, yeah, it's like a legal guardian angel. And, one of the, early podcasts I did, Murder in Oregon, Frank Gable is out of prison because a public defender named Nell Brown would not give up. Um, and again, another, like 186 pages
Yeah,
of doing the investigation that should have been done,
yep,
when he was convicted. And that's, again, that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to conduct the investigation that should have been done before Beverly even got to trial. Honestly, even before she was even arrested.
100%. There's no
So
question. Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things, and we're gonna visit this map as we do these, as you guys get more and more facts. 'Cause this map is pretty interesting, and I'm gonna take it down because I keep wanting to like blow it up and move around the area and show you guys things, but we'll wait for those things. And i- another like, and I think you guys know. I don't know. Have we told them about? Can we tell them about the appeal on this, or should we wait?
it, no, not yet. It's
Okay.
coming. It's coming. It's
All right.
coming.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I won't bring that up. But one case that Alice and I are covering, and we're getting ready to start our second season on, is the Stephen Avery case, which we are doing a super deep dive into that. We call that series "Did He Do It?" did he do it? That's what we call it. And
But you're going to first do the
yes,
2 episodes on Christopher Vaughn.
yes, I will definitely do the Vaughn.
You
Well,
guys
if you gave
help me
good
hold him
information,
to it. Help me hold him to it.
you
I
guys,
want his take. I
you,
want his take.
you gave me good information on it today that I've been waiting for. So, which helps me quite a bit. So, all right.
Will you give them a spoiler alert on that?
No spoiler alerts on that.
Okay.
No spoiler alerts on that.
Okay.
It's interesting though. It's interesting because I think we talked about, how we came to know each other, and it was through the Vaughn case. And I had listened to Murder in Illinois, and I had reached out to you, because I wanted to know more. I was intrigued. I listened to that on nightly dog walks over the course of like 4 nights because I take pretty long walks. So I burned through it pretty
That's
quick.
how we met. And believe me, I was dog walked for that podcast. There are a lot of people. That podcast to this day has 3 stars. It is equally split between 5 stars and 1 star. And I would do it all over again. I would do it all over again.
100%. Like I was telling our community here, I'm like, you guys need to go. Like, there's already the people. Like, Lauren's going to get her Vaughn people. I'm going to get my Richard Allen people that are not going to listen to the podcast, that are just going to give it 1 star just to drive our ratings down. Go over, make sure you guys are giving us 5 stars on it, because it's important. I mean, if somebody's waffling whether or not they're going to listen to something, they probably give some weight to the stars. And, they definitely give some weight, not so much to personal attacks on Lauren and I about how we're awful people because we think certain things or whatever the case may be. But, the more thoughtful, where you can tell somebody's actually listened to it, I think those have weight in swaying people to hit that play button. And then once they start listening, we think pretty confidently that people are going to be hooked on this because we think it's a great, great story. So, all right, when's our next one dropping? When's 3 drop?
Thursday is 3. And then if people have what is it called? iHeart True Crime Plus subscription, they get access to 4.
Yep.
But I am, mark my words, I cannot wait until we are gathered again and we are discussing episode 5, because episode 5 will honestly implode your brain. It is unfathomable that this happened in today's day and age. And I cannot wait to do a group discussion of that.
Yeah. And for next week, what I'm going to do, you guys, is I'm going to put a post on the community page, and I want you guys to put your questions in there, and they could be questions from any of the first 3, because it's kind of a buildup. And sometimes when you hear things later in a later episode, it'll make you think of things that you heard earlier on, and it'll be a question that is kind of born out of that. So, but what I'd like to do for next week is, if you guys have questions, we're going to do it at the same time, same day. We want it to be kind of like rote, so that it's
same bat channel,
same bat time. And, if I get the questions, then I'll pull them up, and then I'll have them, because it's hard for me to look through and select questions. And you guys, believe me when I tell you this, we're giving you the background now. Like, the time for questions is coming, because when we start laying it out there, when we start uncovering things, that's when all the questions start. Just like in any case. Like right now, we're just kind of giving you the state side of it. We haven't really given you much of Julie's side of it, and that's coming.
And you know what? If you get the questions in advance and there's anything that, I mean, we have receipts, we have documents, we have the actual information now, and I'm happy to share that.
Which is a question that we did have in here. Somebody was asking if I can start uploading stuff to our Discord, and the answer to that is yes. I will start uploading things to Discord. I think that we've made a channel in our Discord sub for the pod. So if we've got things that we want to put up that we want you guys to be able to look at, if we have things that we covered in an episode and Lauren's like, here, throw that up in the Discord because it'll be helpful for them to be able to look at it. We'll throw those in there, and then I'll remind you guys there to head over, and then that way you guys can peek at the documents, because we did the same thing with Gacy, where we put in a ton of the police reports so that you guys go look at them yourselves. It's interesting. It allows all the armchair sleuths to kind of start digging for themselves.
Yep.
And we very much.
We do have the trial, Delightfully Chaotic. We do have the trial transcripts. I was deeply going through them again today, looking for more. They're very much of interest. I don't know if we can share them yet. Can we?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet, but we can at some point. I mean, they're public record, so I guess it's a matter of, well, we'd probably want to check with a couple people to make sure that they're
cool. That we're not.
Yeah,
we are doing no harm. First and foremost, we do not wish to do any harm.
For sure. So, all right, I'm going to let you run, and we are going to run. It was fun, always. I always love hanging with you. I get to see your face. It's been a couple weeks since pre-holiday since I've seen you, other than our little drop on the 2nd. When do we do? We do it on the 2nd or the 3rd. So, all right. You're amazing, Lauren. Always. I adore you.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of these great questions and feedback. And I look forward to next week.
Me too. All right, you guys, remember, make sure that you're subscribing wherever you get your pods, Murder on Songbird Road. And make sure you're giving us those 5-star reviews. They really, really mean a lot to us. And it's free. It's really easy for you guys to do. Just takes you a second. And if you really love it, make sure you subscribe to iHeart and their True Crime Plus subscription.
True Crime Plus, yeah. which I don't subscribe to, by the way. Don't tell.
Oh, it's out there now. So, all right, you guys. And then tomorrow there is supposed to be a ruling on Stephen Avery's appellate issues that one Kathleen Zellner is handling up there in Wisconsin. So I'm going to be doing a live about that tomorrow. You guys keep your eyes peeled as soon as I get my hands on that.
I hear she's a formidable defense attorney.
That's what they say. That's the word on the street. So, all right, you guys, thank you very much for hanging with us, and make sure on the way out, make sure you like this, you share, subscribe to the channel. We love you guys so much. Thank you for your generosity, Lisa, Tracy, and to our new member, Hug, Pokey. You've been here forever, so you're just a re-up. And Sinead, but family hugs to all of you. I love you guys. You guys
really
are the
best. Really nice to meet you all virtually. All right. See you next week.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.